where time is but a loop, a loose stitch in the universal cloth. A streamer might seize upon a chance, a fatal slip, and plunge the fate of planets into chaos.
Blood Omen Legacy of Kain was a success, and so the developers knew to strike while the iron was hot. The problem: both Silicon Knights and Crystal Dynamics had the same idea, so both were simultaneously working on a Legacy of Kain sequel. The tensions between Crystal Dynamics and Silicon Knights were high, so much so that the police had to be called once. But Activision demanded a sequel, but working together again would be impossible. Meanwhile, Amy Hennig, we'll get to her in a minute, was working on a game for Eidos called Shifter, which starred an undead creature that sought revenge against his creator for casting him out. None of these games made it very far into development. Dennis Dyack had this to say about developers' treatment. Did you ever wonder why some larger companies sell some really great games and later sell some really bad ones? We believe that there are several complicated reasons for this, but there are two major reasons that contribute to these problems. The first is that creating games is a very difficult process. The second is that generally larger companies do not create all the products. Often external developers like Silicon Knights create the games. There is a problem in our industry. The problem is that the majority of the developers of products do not get credit for their creations. Let's make an analogy to the book industry. If Kane was a book, which is a linear form of entertainment, we would be known as the authors. However, we believe that this is not always the perception with the game industry. Perhaps our industry has not matured yet. We believe that as the book industry matured to the point where the readers began to look for the authors when buying books, so will the game industry mature so that gamers will look for the developers or authors of games. Make no mistake, we created Kane. The game industry is changing in many ways. This is just one of the ways in which it will change. We hail all the publishers who are starting to give credit to the developers because in the end, we all win. So when he found out that Crystal Dynamics was making their own sequel to Legacy of Kain, he was naturally quite pissed. But since Crystal Dynamics owned the rights to the Kain IP, Silicon Knights' options were limited. They sued and eventually a settlement was reached. It's why this screen exists. To let you know that Silicon Knights did Blood Omen and Crystal Dynamics did Soul Reaver. But if there's anything that fans can agree on, while Dennis Dyack and Silicon Knights may have fathered Kain, the series belongs just as much to Amy Hennig, who took over as director of this game. I've already mentioned her in my Uncharted videos, but when it comes to crafting compelling characters and world building, Amy Hennig is an absolute genius. She's arguably one of, if not the best in the industry. You see, while the Star Wars sequel trilogy gets a lot of flack because J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson were basically trying to pull rank over each other with their own visions, Amy Hennig actually respected what came before and built off it, and nothing displeases me more than how she's been treated by the gaming industry, but that's another topic. Well, expect spoilers from here on out, but I think spoiler warranty for this game has expired a long time ago. We'll start with the incredible opening. Everything you need to know from the end of Blood Omen to the beginning of this game is summed up in 3 words.
Kain is deified.
It's here that we meet Raziel, firstborn of Kain's lieutenants. Raziel explains in narration that Kain would undergo the state of evolution first, with Raziel and his brethren falling years after him. But this time Raziel would surpass Kain, and pay close attention to Kain's expression. That is not jealousy in his eyes, but realization. Regardless, Kain rips out the bones of Raziel's wings and sentences him to burn in the lake of the dead.
Cast him in. Tumbling, burning with white-hot fire, I plunged into the depths of the abyss. Unspeakable pain, relentless agony. Time ceased to exist. Only this torture and a deepening hatred of the hypocrisy that damned me to this hell. An eternity passed, and my torment receded, bringing me back from the precipice of madness. The descent had destroyed me, and yet I lived.
Everything about this sequence is genius, and the music helps too. Raziel is awakened as a wraith, and the Elder God, this mysterious being that we don't see in this game, tells Raziel that he must take revenge on his maker. So sets the plot of Soul Reaver. Like Blood Omen, it's a tale of revenge, but Raziel will find out more than he could possibly imagine. For now, let's talk about the characters. Kane is a changed vampire from his time in Blood Omen. It has been over 1,000 years. Vorador implied that vampires take on less human forms as they evolve, and we see that with Kane. In this game, he is painted as the antagonist, or is he really? It is implied that Kane jumped ahead 500 years to when Raziel would awaken, or is it 1,000 years? I'm not sure. Kane has taken the Pillars of Nosgoth as his throne, but like all things, his empire has fallen into decline. There's way more to talk about with Kane than what appears here. A lot of what he does in this game is given context in future games. Brought to life once again by Simon Templeman, he just oozes badass. Kane doesn't get much screen time compared to Blood Omen, but that's okay. Even when he's not on screen, his very presence is felt. Kane is impacting every move Raziel and the rest of the characters make.
Damn you, Kane! You are not God! This act of genocide is unconscionable!
Conscience? You dare to speak to me of conscience? Only when you have felt the full gravity of choice should you dare question my judgment. Your lifespan is a flicker compared to the mass of doubt and regret that I have borne since Mortanius first turned me from the light. To know that the fate of the world hangs dependent on the advisedness of my every deed? Can you even begin to conceive what action you would take in my position?
Our new anti-hero Raziel is in many ways similar to Kane, but also very different. After being thrown into the Lake of the Dead, Raziel is reborn as a wraith. Rather than tasting blood, Raziel must devour souls. Raziel and Kane's journeys deliberately parallel each other. Kane is murdered. Raziel is executed. Kane is reborn in fire. Raziel is reborn in water. Mortanius resurrects Kane as a vampire and charges him with wiping out the Circle of Nine to restore the Pillars of Nosgoth. The other god resurrects Raziel as a wraith and charges him with wiping out the vampires to restore the Wheel of Fate. Kane sustains himself by drinking the blood of his former species. Raziel sustains himself by devouring the souls of his former species. However, there are enough differences so as to not tell the same story twice, particularly in how his relationship with humanity changes. While Kane ultimately renounces his humanity, Raziel learns that in life he was a Seraphan, someone who hunted the vampires. Remember Malik from Blood Omen. One little touch I like is that Malik's grave is defaced. Kane is a little petty like that. Raziel's personality is the inverse of Kane's. While Kane had a powerful charisma despite his arrogance, Raziel's elegance and charm are offset by a sense of self-righteousness.
I would choose integrity, Kane.
Raziel is brought to life by Michael Bell, who gives Raziel a smooth voice. I met Michael Bell twice, and he agreed with me that the opening is fantastic. As for some of Raziel's brothers, let's cover Micaiah first. The youngest of Kane's lieutenants, Micaiah has since devolved into a hulking, malformed abomination that requires corpses to be sewn into his skeleton. Voiced by Michael Bell.
Everyone is afraid, sibling. You awake to a world of fear. These times of change are so unsettling.
Zephron is metamorphosed into a titanic insectoid, voiced by Tony J, who can speak in a higher voice.
Well, instinct reflects action. The insect mind finds little difference. I warn you, brother. As my stature has grown, so it is matched by my appetite.
Rahib, who is a very minor character, has at least evolved to the point where he can go into water, which Nosgoth's vampires never lost their vulnerability to. He and his clan hunt the Downed Abbey, where their increased vulnerability to sunlight has left them unable to leave. He's voiced by Neil Ross, who does good with very little.
Do not mock me, Raziel. You of all of us should respect the power bestowed by a limitation overcome.
Dumas is found impaled. Once you pull the stakes out, he comes back to life. His transformation is markedly less grotesque. He's actually voiced by Simon Templeman, who gives him a drowsy sort of voice.
We shall test your thesis, Raziel.
Finally, there's Terrell, who is actually not in this game. Why that happened is something I'll explain later. The Elder God isn't seen much, but is the primordial entity in charge of the Wheel of Fate, Nosgoth's engine of life and death. The wheel has grown stagnant because of Nosgoth's overflowing with vampires. It's hard to get too much into him without going to later games. Voiced again by Tony Jay, the same actor who brought Kane back to life brings Raziel back to life.
Death would be a release next to this travesty.
You did not survive the abyss, Raziel. I have only spared you from total dissolution.
Ariel makes a little cameo because Kane refused to sacrifice. She is bound forever to the Pillars of Nosgoth, unable to move on. For that, she holds quite a bit of resentment towards Kane. Voiced again by Anna Gunn, Ariel was supposed to have a larger role, but we'll get to that.
Kane refused the sacrifice. The Pillar of Balance, corrupted to its core, stands as a monument to his blind ambition. Now these pillars serve only to bind me here, my prison and eternal home, thanks to the avarice of your master, Kane.
Finally, we have the Soul Reaver. Kane's most powerful weapon returns, but when he tries to use it on Raziel, the blade breaks, and the blade becomes a Wraith Blade bounded to Raziel, for reasons that we will soon find out.
For all our bravado, we knew what it meant when Kane drew the Soul Reaver in anger. It meant you were dead.
Basically, Kane in this game has a certain sense of fatalism. He believes that fate is preordained, while Raziel is hinted to be an unbound creature. Does he possess free will? Raziel does possess free will, but is manipulated by both Kane and Elder God to do what they want. It's one of the major themes of this universe. Do we have free will, or are we preordained to destiny? The history of Nosgoth is unfolding, and every character is playing their part. But what is Raziel's role in all this? Is he Redeemer or Destroyer? Well, that's the driving question. Soul Reaver's story is compelling. It contains enough references to Blood Omen that those who've played it will notice them, while those who haven't played it will be compelled to go play it. There are enough differences. This series is carried by the strength of its two leads, Kane and Raziel. Anytime the two are on screen together, you're going to get well-written, woven dialogue as Simon Templeman and Michael Bell play off each other like the professionals they are. As this is a late PlayStation 1 game, the graphics are about on par with Metal Gear Solid's. The characters' lips and mouths don't move when they talk, so their expressions are shown through body language. I love when Raziel jumps back after he meets Kane, but the opening FMV is just mind-blowing for its time. Like Blood Omen, Soul Reaver's presentation is carried by the strength of its voice acting. They weren't able to get many voice actors, but they made use of what they had. What's particularly impressive about the game is that there are next to no load times. I'm aware that Soul Reaver did receive a Dreamcast port that touches up many of the little technical hiccups that the PlayStation version had, but I unfortunately don't have the Dreamcast version. If I did, I would have played that version. Also, I really wish I had a PS1 controller that had an analog stick. Playing a 3D platform with a D-pad is just not comfortable. It's manageable, but not comfortable. While Blood Omen was a top-down adventure game, Soul Reaver is more like Ocarina of Time, in that it's a 3D adventure game. It's built like a Zelda map or Metroidvania, where you can freely travel to wherever you wish. Fortunately, there is a gate system that allows you to fast travel anywhere you previously visited so long as you activated the gate, although it requires you to know the symbol of each location. I wish there was a map system in place that I could use. Even Blood Omen had a map. I do like that the world is open to exploration. The world has changed in the 1,000+ years it's been since Blood Omen, and one of my favorite things was finding Nutratcher's retreat abandoned after all these years. It's a cool little detail. Or going to the human sanctuary where the last remnants of humankind live out their lives safe from the vampires. The world of Nosgoth has changed and decayed, but is it truly beyond saving? Raziel controls well enough. Using the square button he will attack. The circle button he will use to consume souls. The cross button is for jumping. Raziel can also use his destroyed wings to temporarily glide across chasms. With the push of the L1 and cross button, Raziel can high jump to higher ledges. Thankfully that's not an upgrade, he has it right away. Raziel has to engage in combat with his vampiric enemies. He can wear them down, but he can't kill them conventionally. He must finish them off by either impaling them, burning them, throwing them into water, or dragging them into harsh sunlight. Therefore the game encourages you to pick up weapons, whether it be a spear or a flame torch. Or alternatively, you can just pick up and throw your enemies to where you want them to go, but this is less reliable, I find. The triangle button is for throwing or execution. Once Raziel gets the Soul Reaver, the Wraith Blade will become his primary weapon, but it's only active when his health is full, at least in the material realm. In the spectral realm, however... What a good segue that was. Soul Reaver is built upon two worlds. like how in A Link to the Past it was built around the light and dark world mechanic, or how Ocarina of Time was built around traveling the child and adult Link's time eras. Soul Reaver is built around switching between the material realm and the spectral realm. In the spectral realm, time is frozen.
Be aware that in the spectral realm, water has neither heft nor lift. It stands as thin as air.
Yes, thank you. With the push of the select button, Raziel can switch between the material realm and the spectral realm at will, but he can only switch back to the material realm by accessing a conduit, and he must be at full health to do so. What's cool about this is in switching between realms, the landscape completely changes. So if you're at a dead end, by simply switching realms, what was once inaccessible becomes accessible. As an immortal, Raziel cannot die. Should he run out of health, he will simply switch to the spectral realm automatically. When Raziel defeats a boss, he gains access to their abilities, such as the ability to phase through gates, only in the spectral realm, climb walls, only in the material world, the ability to shoot projectiles, the ability to swim, and Constrict, which allows Raziel to turn things by running around them in a circle. Kind of annoying to do when you're using a D-pad. Soul Reaver relies mainly on puzzles, and that means block puzzles. Block puzzles galore. I swear if I never have to do another block puzzle again, it'll be too soon. But it's not enough that you have to push the blocks into place. You have to flip them over, match up the picture you're trying to complete. This happens way too much. I suppose it was a popular way to do game design at the time. Raziel can find health upgrades and glyphs that can give him added abilities, and the addition of adding fire to the Soul Reaver. The glyphs all pale in comparison to the Sunlight glyph, which destroys everything. Fighting the bosses is also a puzzle in and of itself. You can't fight them directly, so instead Raziel must use his wits to outsmart them and destroy them with their weakness. It's all rather clever. In-depth combat wasn't really a thing back then, so it was good enough. Once Raziel arrives at the Chronoplast, he finds visions of things that have come to be and have not happened yet. More on that in a second. Inside, he finds Kane, who is setting up one of Mobius' time-streaming devices. The playoff between Kane and Raziel is as amazing as ever.
With our holy wars, our obsession with Nosgoth's domination, who better to serve me than those whose passion transcends all notions of good and evil?
I will not applaud your clever blasphemy. The Seraphan were saviors, defending Nosgoth from the corruption that we represent. My eyes are opened, Kane. I find no nobility in the unlife you rudely forced on my unwilling corpse.
You may have uncovered your past, but you know nothing of it. You think the Seraphan were noble, altruistic? Don't be simple. Their agenda was the same as ours.
You are lost in a maze of moral relativism, Kane. These apparitions and portents. What game are you playing now?
Destiny is a game, is it not? And now, you await my latest move.
The Battle of Kain actually was pretty simple. All you have to do is hit him 3 times. He can take off a good chunk of your health with a lightning blast, though. Once Kain is defeated, Raziel is able to devour a partial amount of Kain's soul, granting him the ability to shift at will, while Kain flees to the mountain retreat. Raziel then travels to the city, where he fights the priestess and gains the ability to possess. After that, Raziel fights Terrell. After devouring his soul, he gains Amplified Soul Projectile. Raziel then meets Ariel, who sacrifices herself to allow Raziel to empower the Soul Reaver Blade. Then Raziel confronts Kane, who wants Raziel to kill him to succeed where he would not in restoring balance to Nosgoth. Raziel kills Kane and gains the Amplified Reaver, then goes to the top of the Silence Cathedral and rings a bell that wipes out all vampires in Nosgoth. The Elder God congratulates Raziel, but Raziel realizes that he was the Elder God's pawn all along, as destroying the vampires had disastrous consequences. So Raziel uses Mobius' time-streaming device to go back in time and undo the damage he has done. Oh wait, none of that actually happened. Yes, Soul Reaver is a half-finished game. You see, Amy Hennig and the crew wouldn't have been able to get the game out in time for its release date if they were able to finish the game. This is unfortunately a common problem with this series. So I'll cover what we actually got in a minute to end the video. How shall I sum up the Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver? It's an ambitious game. While the gameplay is definitely flawed, it's good enough to suffice. It's really held together by its story and presentation. I kept going because Nosgoth is so interesting. I want to learn more. I want to learn about what happens to these characters. I'm invested. So Soul Reaver is definitely ambitious and it deserves praise for that alone. It's just a shame it wasn't finished. Maybe they could have spent all that time they spent marketing the game with comics and such to actually finish the game. So what we actually got, Kane flees through the time stream device, Raziel follows and is met by a familiar face.
Raziel, Redeemer and Destroyer, Pawn and Messiah, welcome, time-span soul. Welcome to your destiny.
Next time we cover Soul Reaver 2. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit that bell, like, and subscribe button. If you want updates, follow me on Twitter or join my Discord, which are provided in the description below. See you next time.